The courtroom was tense, the air thick with expectation. A seasoned lawyer, confident in his years of experience, dismissed the testimony of a highly qualified black expert witness. He brushed it off, unaware that the man he overlooked wasn't just an expert in his field. He was a rising figure in the legal community with the power to shake his world. The lawyer's arrogance might have felt like a small victory in the moment, but it set off a chain of events he never saw coming. Behind closed doors, the expert's reputation and influence were growing, and soon he'd hold the fate of the very lawyer who disrespected him. What happens when a legal titan's career is challenged by the man he underestimated? Stay tuned as we uncover a story of hubris, justice, and a dramatic twist that turned the tables in the most unexpected way. The expert, a man whose credentials spoke for themselves, had spent decades building a reputation for fairness, precision, and integrity in his field. His testimony in the case wasn't just thorough, it was critical. But the lawyer, confident in his own ability to control the narrative, dismissed it with barely a second thought. To him, it was just another tactic to win, another voice to silence in his pursuit of victory. What he didn't know was that the man he ignored had a far-reaching network of respect and influence, especially within the legal oversight community. Behind the scenes, whispers about the lawyer's conduct began to spread. Was this just an isolated incident, or part of a pattern of arrogance and disregard? The expert's testimony became a lightning rod, drawing attention to a bigger issue. As the tension mounted, the lawyer carried on, oblivious to the storm quietly brewing around him. As the case wrapped up, the lawyer walked away with a smug sense of accomplishment. He had won, but his methods had raised more than a few eyebrows. Quiet murmurs began circulating in legal circles about the way he had discredited the expert, his tone dismissive, his arguments bordering on personal rather than professional. For those in the room that day, it wasn't just about a courtroom strategy. It felt like something deeper, a disregard for fairness and respect. Meanwhile, the expert wasn't looking for revenge, but he also wasn't one to ignore an injustice. His position as an emerging leader on a professional committee overseeing legal ethics meant that he couldn't let the lawyer's actions go unnoticed. Others on the committee began to take interest, pulling records and reviewing past cases. Was this a one-time misstep, or did it point to a troubling pattern? The tension grew, but for now, the lawyer remained unaware that the walls were slowly closing in. The lawyer's confidence grew as he moved on to his next cases, completely unaware that his actions had sparked something far bigger than a courtroom win. Within the Legal Ethics Committee, discussions were intensifying. Members reviewed his history, uncovering patterns of dismissive behavior towards certain witnesses and questionable tactics in high-profile cases. The more they dug, the more they began to see a troubling picture of arrogance and disregard for professional standards. Outside the committee, whispers turned into quiet but purposeful inquiries. Fellow lawyers, former clients, and even judges began sharing their stories, some defending him, others pointing out moments when his ambition had crossed ethical lines. The expert, though calm and composed, became the center of this storm. His integrity and credibility made his words impossible to ignore. Unaware of what was brewing, the lawyer continued business as usual, until one day a letter arrived. It wasn't just any letter, it was the beginning of the end. The lawyer stared at the letter in disbelief. It was a formal notice from the Legal Ethics Committee, informing him that a review of his professional conduct had been initiated. At first, he dismissed it as routine, a minor inconvenience that would soon be forgotten. But as he read further, his confidence began to waver. The letter mentioned specifics. The case where he had dismissed the black expert's testimony, his tone in the courtroom, and patterns of behavior that hinted at something deeper. Still, he convinced himself it would blow over. What he didn't know was that the expert had declined to lead the review personally, opting instead to let the committee's findings speak for themselves. But behind the scenes, another twist was unfolding. A journalist had caught wind of the story, and questions about fairness, ethics, and bias were beginning to spill into the public eye. Now it wasn't just a private inquiry, it was becoming a public reckoning. As the lawyer prepared for the committee hearing, his once unshakable confidence began to crack. The investigation had gained momentum, and the public scrutiny was impossible to ignore. He arrived determined to defend himself, still believing his reputation and connections would carry him through. But the evidence presented was overwhelming. Patterns of dismissiveness, questionable conduct, and his disregard for professional ethics were laid bare. Witnesses, including those who had worked with him, shared stories that painted a troubling picture. The expert remained composed as the proceedings unfolded, offering no personal remarks, but letting the facts speak. Just when it seemed the lawyer's fate was sealed, he tried a last-minute move, an emotional plea, claiming he had been misunderstood and promising to change. For a moment, it seemed like he might sway the room. But the final twist came when another member of the committee revealed a letter, written by the lawyer himself years ago, mocking the very guidelines he was now trying to defend. The room fell silent. That single piece of evidence destroyed his credibility, and the committee's decision was unanimous. His license was revoked. As the lawyer left in disgrace, he realized too late that his arrogance had been his undoing, while the expert's quiet integrity had carried the day. As the dust settled, the lawyer's fall from grace sent ripples through the legal community. It wasn't just about the loss of his license. It was a wake-up call about the importance of integrity and respect in the profession. For years, he had relied on arrogance and shortcuts, but in the end, it had cost him everything. The expert, meanwhile, quietly returned to his work, never seeking credit or attention for what had happened. His focus remained on building a system where accountability mattered and voices weren't dismissed based on bias or ego. The story became a lesson for many, one about how actions, even those thought insignificant, can have lasting consequences. It showed how quiet perseverance and fairness can outshine arrogance and disregard. In the end, the expert's influence grew, not because he sought power, but because he stood for something greater, the principles of justice and respect.